All right, thanks for staying with us, everyone. We turn our attention to the Middle East, where Iranian officials say the country is ready for war, but not seeking one, while remaining open to talks with the United States. Speaking recently, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Iran does not want conflict, but is prepared to defend itself. The remarks came after President Trump said he is considering military options against Iran. The comments come amid a third week of widespread anti-government protests triggered by soaring prices and a collapsing currencies. Demonstrations have spread across major cities and towns, marking the biggest challenge to Iran's leadership since 2022. Let's bring in our guest, Dr. Brian Ruben. He is Executive Chairman, 16th Council UK. Good to have you join us, Dr. Brian.
Thank you so much for having me.
When you follow, or as you follow what's going on in Iran, the chants on the streets are quite different this time. Does this signal a shift? Is this a revolution?
I hope it can become one. Iran is under intense pressure, on two fronts at the same time, internally and externally. And that combination is what makes this moment particularly, especially volatile. Inside the country, there's widespread protests driven by economic strain and political frustration, and that have met a hard security response, with reports of hundreds being killed. That has deepened domestic, tension and drawn global scrutiny. But externally also, Tehran is projecting a dual message. It said it is prepared for war, yet it's open to talks with the US. That's not mismessaging, it's a strategic ambiguity aimed at deterring intervention while keeping diplomatic options open and alive. So into this environment comes a significant escalation from Washington. President Trump has just announced a 25% tariff on countries doing business with Iran. And this, of course, widens the pressure beyond Iran itself, forcing its trading partners to reassess, as it were, their exposure. And it also raises economic stakes at a time when the region is already, fragile. And that's a combination that is very dangerous. It increases both leverage and risk. So the central issue now is whether this pressure that is coming from all fronts produces a negotiation, or whether it's rather will harden positions and pushes the region even closer to instability.
And as you, I don't know if you listened to the statement coming from the Ayatollah today. It was pretty much in what's it called, in Russian language. But you find that he has issued a stern warning to the U.S. government to stay out of his politics. But protesters are openly calling for the fall of the Islamic Republic and then the return of the Pahlavi dynasty. Does the Ayatollah and that government still retain enough coercive power to survive?
Well, the regime can survive, because it's not about, we are not talking about legitimacy. We're talking about, continuing in government, and they still have the ability to, pressure the people, keep people in check. They have the ability to enforce their will on the people. However, legitimacy is weakening. The people's support is weakening. It's very fragile right now. But in terms of survivability, they still have the tools required to keep going.
And they say they're open to negotiations with the U.S. president. President Trump has said, look, it is also open to negotiations, but it might intervene just before that negotiation. He's done it before. He issued a 2 weeks warning, and then had a military strike had an airstrike in Iran. Do you think that, look, anytime soon, the U.S. president will definitely intervene, and in what form do you think that intervention will come?
He said, in what form? What
will that intervention come?
Okay, well, negotiations have, technically been on the table, but they've always been very fragile. The U.S. signaling openness to talks while simultaneously increasing pressure, creates uncertainty. And this is a real concern, because the real concern is that Washington may choose to act just like Trump has said, and he's done that before. And to be honest, it could be difficult to predict exactly how he responds. And the message of Ayatollah warning the US to stay away could actually escalate things and even move the timeline a little bit, closer to a military intervention. So that's very difficult to pinpoint as when that could happen. But Trump has not ruled out anything, and he doesn't make a lot of noise about intervention. If he says he's going to do it, there's a very big, likelihood that that's actually going to happen.
And Israel is asking protesters not to back down, saying they're looking forward to a normalization of ties between Iran and Israel if there's a regime change. But what would be the implication of a regime change in Iran for the region?
Again, I thought I missed it. We say what would be the implication of what?
A regime change in Iran for the region.
Okay, well, let's put it this way. In theory, a future Iranian government that abandons the current theocratic anti-Israel ideology could reopen diplomatic channels, that were severed after the 1979 revolution. Historically, relations throughout 1979 were not hostile, and some analysts have argued that normalization and cooperation could become viable under a more moderate or secular government. So, in fact, Israeli leaders have publicly, as you mentioned, suggested that a post-regime, Iran might shift from adversary to partner, especially if its foreign policy priorities changes. So, but this is a conditional possibility, not a foregone calculation. Normalization, would require profound ideological changes into Iran's political culture, not just a change in leadership.
Right, we're seeing how it plays out. The Ayatollah regime came in through a revolution. Will a revolution take them out? We'll see how that plays out in Iran. Thank you so much for your time, as always. Chairman, Sitting Council UK, Dr. Brian Ruben. Pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much, Precious.